Welcome to IB Unplugged, a Cognity podcast for IBDP educators that tackles your submitted challenges and questions by connecting you with experts and peers who share their ideas and stories from real classrooms. Whether you're a seasoned educator or new to the IB world, each biweekly episode and guest aims to equip you with practical tips and positive inspiration, helping you teach with more confidence, creativity, and joy. So whether you're walking your dog or commuting to school, hit play and join a community of educators ready to learn, laugh, and thrive in your IB journey. Hello and welcome to IB Unplugged. This week we're talking with Fidelis Nthenge, the Director of Curriculum Development at the IB. Super interesting person, lots of fun discussion that's coming up in this episode for you.
Yeah, so we really had a chance to be able to peek behind the curtain at the curriculum development process, really learn about how the team works with feedback with the development teams, working with teachers and kind of all the different stakeholders on how it actually does evolve over time, how they kind of respond to the changes in the world, in the program, with students to really be able to develop a meaningful curriculum. And one thing that I really appreciated in our conversations was how much she and the IBO really prioritize student agency, not just within the actual classes, but within the actual program, and how much it's really an important component to what they see the future of the IB and the IB program.
Yeah, so if you've ever thought, well, what is going on with this curriculum? Why is there so much stuff in here? There's too much content to cover. How am I possibly going to do all these things? This episode gives so much more insight into the overall process of the curriculum itself and how it's developed. And I guess the key thing that really stands out for me in this conversation, and I think for any educator, what you can really look forward to hearing here is about how dynamic and responsive the IB curriculum team really is when it comes to developing curriculum that is relevant, that is important, and helps to develop young people into being positive contributors to society. Fidelis talks a lot about how they look for feedback in all these different forms and how much they value that feedback from students and from teachers, and really try to honor the experiences of those two stakeholders, especially because we know that, students are the future of what we're trying to create within the curriculum itself, and teachers, of course, are the facilitators of that learning experience. So she's highly interested in how people are experiencing the curriculum and making sure that it is dynamic and ready to meet the needs of anybody who's going through it. So lots of great stuff in this episode for you. We hope you enjoy. Hi, Fidelis. Welcome to IB Unplugged.
Hello, John and Courtney. Nice to be part of this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. We're really excited to dive into a conversation around curriculum development and the curriculum at the IB in general. But before we do, we like to get to know our guests a little bit and do a couple warm-up questions. And the first one has to do with, why did you select a career in education?
I didn't go to education because probably I thought I would make a lot of money. Those of us in education know that this is one profession that it's something like from the heart. It's not about how much you make in education. And the main reason I went into education is because I am a total believer that education is the way we evolve our lives and our quality of living. And there is no better way of ensuring that for generations, people's quality of life or people's development will get better if we invest in education. And I wanted to be a key stakeholder in that. I wanted to be a key player in the landscape where we are talking about how we work with young people so that we can develop the kind of capabilities that will make them hold a better space in their life and in future, and navigate around the complexities as well.
That's a beautiful answer.
Yeah. And on that, I think really thinking about that role of education, if you think going forward, what do you see in the next decade or so, some of the big changes to expect in secondary education?
I think one of the things that we must embrace is the fact that the role of the teacher and the role of the student and the role of the parent, basically key agents in education, those roles will evolve. Students will become key players in forging their learning and in filtering what they consume and what they create. And that puts the position of the teacher in a different level. The teachers will mainly become facilitators. They can help students scaffold or find ways of filtering knowledge, because children are continuously going to be exposed to a lot of knowledge. And therefore, the role of the teacher almost being like the key determinant in regards to the learning pathway of students will continue changing. And the student will hold a bigger space in determining how their learning happens and in forging their learning pathways. The role of the parent as well will change, because we've seen more scenarios where formal schooling as we have known it will continue changing. And therefore, if there is a way education systems can prepare more materials for parents in terms of ensuring that they can guide their young people, they can be true partners in the learning journeys of their children, that will be great. So the role of the parent will change in terms of becoming the guiding person, not necessarily the person who chooses what kind of education or what kind of schooling their child will go through. In other words, the student will become the key voice in determining their learning, and the other agents will become more of supporting or facilitators in learning.
I appreciate that a whole lot. Often when we talk about the future of education, we sometimes get caught up on the student or the teacher, but it's really refreshing to hear you speak about the role of the parent as well. I think often schools kind of get caught up thinking just student teacher, and almost forget that other stakeholder. And I think that stakeholder, like parents, can sometimes lose their role in like, what am I supposed to do here as well? So I really appreciate you mentioning that as well. And this idea that we're both those stakeholders, can be facilitating the learning options and learning opportunities as the student becomes the center of their own driven education.
Yeah.
Now, we were speaking just a moment ago before we actually started the show. You know, you and I had something in common where you were an IBDP coordinator for a while. You've had a rich experience in schools before you went on to become the director of curriculum development at IB. Talk to us about, you know, what prompted that change and what are you doing at the IB now?
So for years I worked in schools, and John, as I've said, my best position in the school was when I was the IB diploma coordinator. And I just felt like I was in such a privileged position to help in scaffolding to the teachers the requirements of a great educational experience for our young people at 16 years of age. Because I was the main contact person with the IB, I spent a lot of time on what is now called the Program Resource Center. Those days used to be called something else. The Online Curriculum Center, it was called then. I mean, this tells you how long I've been in the IB field. And I would spend a lot of time going through any new changes in courses and support the teachers in scaffolding that and bringing that learning experience into the classroom. While at the same time, the head of school and generally the school leadership depended on me to give guidance in terms of where should we be moving towards in developing our diploma program in the school. So I felt like I was in such a privileged position because I also influenced how the kids were going to experience that IB diploma program in the school. And to me, seeing the children graduate through the school was such a fulfilling experience. A job satisfaction for me, but also a satisfaction as a parent, because I've also been an IB parent. I always envisioned my own children going through this, and therefore I gave it my best. So it was my best position. But how that evolved is that when I eventually became the head of school, I thought I should continue teaching at least 1 or 2 classes. And I kept my economics class even as a head of school. Sometimes I would teach my the business class. And I felt I was concentrated or focused on one school community. And therefore, my impact went as far as that school community.
Right.
And I had always had this dream that I would like to impact greater, not just my school community. Mm-hmm. I would like to be a global influencer in the kind of education that young people will engage in. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started thinking about working for the IB. And then I moved to the International Baccalaureate. That time I moved as a school services manager in the diploma program. And I was responsible for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And moved on to be a global head of IB World Schools. But thought that by the time the curriculum comes to us, so that IB World Schools can work with the schools to ensure implementation with fidelity, it's already been decided by the curriculum team of the IB.
Sure.
And I thought a greater impact would be putting myself in the center of deciding what really ends up in those diploma course guides, what ends up in the primary years program, what ends up in the middle years program, what is that curriculum that actually now goes to the schools, and what is that curriculum framework that we will hand over to schools and implement. So I brought in the schools perspective, the implementation perspective, and that has come into the design and informing the curriculum managers in the IB what is really essential, what is needed in the schools. Like not just what the IB thinks, oh, we should have this and this, but what do we think is needed? Mm-hmm. And therefore, I provide that. What is needed? What should be going to the schools? What will create the best engagement between the teacher and the student in the classroom? So that's how I ended up in curriculum development. I never thought that I would be working in curriculum development, but hey, the schools were a good place for me to be, but being in the team that designs what will end up in the classroom is even more fulfilling for me.
Yeah.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about what it looks like for your team when you are developing the curriculum. Like, how does this process work within your team?
So, because the program probably that is mostly known, especially for the children who have to go to university, is the IB diploma program and the IB career-related program. I would want to pick some of the courses in the diploma program, how we develop those.
Yeah.
So it's not just that the curriculum manager sits down and says, oh, I think this is what we need to be teaching in economics, or this is what we should be having in mathematics.
You mean there's more thought than that?
There is a whole process that goes into this. So if we were to start from when we launch a course guide, when the course guide lands in the schools, for example, this coming September, we will have psychology, for example, first teaching this September. As soon as that begins this September, the curriculum manager, the head, the assessment manager, and a few other people will embark on what we call as a research and development phase for that course, for that particular course. This happens for all the subjects across the diploma, all of them. Mm-hmm. And in that research phase, which lasts about 2 years, by the end of that phase, that small team will have consulted with academicians in that field. In this case, would be psychology. They would have consulted with thought leaders as well, universities, other organizations, and whatever they are doing. Other education organizations, not just the IB. And then the kids will write the exams at the end of 2 years. As soon as we get the first exam results back, we go and check whether our learning outcomes or the objectives of the course were actually met. And the only way we can check that is through the diploma results. So we check which of the objectives, how did the students perform and all that. And that is another feedback loop for the curriculum manager at the end of the 2 years. So we get the student performance. We have been researching in this area. And then you pull all these together and the curriculum manager begins what we call development meetings for this course. And you probably are aware that the way we do our development meetings is that we engage a lot from the IB community because we are strong believers in co-creating our educational offers with our own community, including the students. So we'll bring in representatives from the classroom teachers, we'll bring in coordinators like you, John, we'll bring in other thought leaders in that field of psychology. We'll have meetings in person, online, hybrid, different ways of collaborating. And the curriculum manager will continue having these development meetings for a period of about 2 years, 3 years. And then they start now pulling together the next iteration of the psychology course, the next iteration of the next course. And in about between 5 to 6, 7 years, we will have a new course. So that's the process involves a lot of collaboration and co-creation with our community. But I have to underline that the IB community is the strongest stakeholder in co-designing with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we can see that any sort of anybody who leads a curriculum anywhere or as a curriculum educator, that you get those sort of feedback surveys. You get that opportunity to feedback on it. Like as a biology teacher, we've just had the first assessment of the 2025, the new biology one, and right away I was getting feedback from or opportunities to give feedback to the IB on how it went and how was the pacing of it, what did it work, what was difficult about getting this course all the way through. So I think that's definitely something I really, really appreciate is that it's not a stagnant, we've said it, now you've just got to do it and carry it on and we're going to leave it that way. I think you really do embody this idea of we are going to be lifelong learners about this and we want to continually develop our curriculum. We want to find ways to make it more impactful and better. And I think that's a really useful way of making sure that there's something that's relevant and new for everybody, every 6 to 7 years, as you just said.
John, you picked something very important, just keeping it relevant. It needs to be relevant. Otherwise, it loses meaning. And especially with our young people, they need to see sense in why are they learning these topics in biology. It needs to remain relevant. And you picked a good subject, biology. We don't even have to wait for all those years. We've already gotten feedback that it is such a wide course.
Sure.
And right now, the curriculum manager is working on how we can even make certain changes before even those 5 years are over.
I see. Okay. And what's interesting to me about this whole thing is that you are getting that feedback, but as I would notice just from the previous iteration of the biology syllabus, for example, to what it is now, there's been a big push to a lot more conceptual understanding of like bridging better ideas and different connections together as opposed to more content. And, we were discussing with somebody else with regard to the psychology curriculum that you brought up, that there's a big change there as well with focus on like the contexts and the concepts and this sort of thing. And I'm wondering, if you could expand on kind of your time here, how has that curriculum development shifted over the last few years? What have been some of the biggest changes that you've seen in the way that the curriculum is put together for all the different courses?
A great question. And probably members of the IB community will know that broadly the way we design our courses, especially in the diploma, we are guided by 3 key things. We call them the 3 C's. Is the content, because we cannot leave out content. Learners will need some deep understanding of certain content. It is the contexts and the concepts. That is what you just talked about, concepts. Mm-hmm. So we call them the 3 C's, the content, the concept, and the context. And that enables us to have that kind of guidance and that framework that once we've designed the course allows the teachers to implement those courses in the classroom within different contexts. of course. There is nothing as difficult as designing a curriculum for the world, for different countries.
Yeah.
While in national curriculum, you have guidance, you know that the country's learning outcomes, this is what we want, this is what we want our young people to graduate with, and it is guided by the national requirements of that particular country. But we are talking about designing a curriculum for the world.
Right.
Not just say for Netherlands or for Finland, or for Denmark or for Chile. No, we are designing such that it can be implemented in all these different countries, and that's why we follow that framework. You wanted to say something, John, about the way we design.
Well, I was just commenting on how massive that task must be, because we were talking with Matt a little while ago about Director of Assessment, and he was talking about how he has to have an assessment that will allow him to assess if somebody's, from a level 1 all the way to a level 7, you've got to get that information in maybe a 1.5 hour paper or something like this. And I thought, that's got to be a massive task. But then when you kind of step that back and just recognize this curriculum has to be able to be implemented in the most heavily resourced schools that have access to all these things, and the least resourced schools, those that maybe don't have all this stuff. And even as I get to do workshops with the IB as well. And I did a workshop on incorporating fieldwork, and I had some people who are really like, I don't have this equipment. I don't have access to this thing. How do I possibly implement these things? And what I really loved about the way, at least again, Biology Guide was constructed is like, you can build things. There's still tons of creativity that you can come up with that'll build this out here. And so I guess there's not really a question there. It's just, I want to recognize the impressive nature of having to create a curriculum that is accessible for everybody everywhere, regardless of their context. And that's got to be a massive job for your team.
It's massive. And my team, they are largely from the practitioners field. They are largely from education. And you know what it means when you put educators together and they can talk and argue about, no, we should be having this. And therefore, you ask me, how do we ensure that there is a clear direction that we follow in the way we design? We have a well-established curriculum model that every curriculum manager follows in building any of the courses. And this curriculum model is not only for the diploma and career-related, it's also the same curriculum model that we'll use for the primary years program, the same we'll use for the middle years program. So curriculum managers are also guided by that curriculum model, and also the way we will write it and how it will be presented to the schools. We have a certain content model that we have to follow. Now, in the curriculum model, when you talk to the director of assessment, probably you will have talked about how we ensure that when we design the courses, we also design the assessment model that the assessment team is going to operationalize. Mm-hmm. But that assessment model needs also to be coherent across certain groups. Like, we cannot have an assessment model in group 3, individuals and societies, that is so significantly different between geography and business and psychology.
Right.
I mean, individuals and societies are our largest group and kind of a bit different. But if you think about implementing a curriculum model or an assessment model for the sciences, is probably much better, much smoother. Now, to keep this team coherent, they are guided by the curriculum model, and they will be guided in terms of publishing the content by the content model. But as you can imagine, this is not a rigid model. As I said, education is always evolving. And therefore, year after year, this model, I can tell you, it's not kept rigid. Especially when I put together the curriculum managers in our team, the level of discussions and arguments and what we should be removing from the model and what we should be adding and what is left for the teachers in the classroom and how much agency are we giving teachers and students by keeping this model like this. So all these discussions are there. Mm-hmm. And it's a beauty of the work when you pull together all these people. Yeah.
Are you an IB educator wanting to improve your practice and needing just a bit more support getting there? Ever wanted to learn more about a specific aspect of the diploma program, or just ask a question to an educational theorist about a specific IB aspect? IB Unplugged is the place for you. Simply visit cognity.com/IB Unplugged to submit your question to us and have your question explored in more detail in an upcoming episode. And now, back to the show. So when you mentioned how the model is flexible, am I right in thinking that those sort of 3 C's you were talking about before are kind of the main curriculum model? They're always going to be there. We're always going to talk about the content, the context, and the concepts, and it's just what kind of gets the more emphasis? Or is there more to that curriculum model that you're talking about?
So the one thing that we want to ensure is that we kind of a shared understanding of the knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and value systems that our schools can be able to enhance when they get whatever we have designed. So we are guided by that. We always want to ask ourselves, what are the knowledge? What are the areas of knowledge in this course? What are the skills? What are the attitudes and the values and value systems? And curriculum managers are guided by that. The curriculum model, I don't need to go through the boring process of sharing with you the details of a curriculum model, but our curriculum model, of course, is built based on our IB mission and our philosophy. It's guided by that. Mm-hmm. So it is, we start with the why, as you know, that is our mission, and then we will go into the what we develop, and then we will go into what are the key contexts with which our curriculum will be implemented. So it's a whole process. But it is mainly guided by our mission, the why. Mm-hmm. Why are we in education, and therefore what, and then with whom later on, because we have to design it for different contexts as well. Mm-hmm. And from the director of assessment team, we also design for them how well are we going to be able to assess that. Mm-hmm. And we leave a lot of space for teachers also to decide how well they've implemented that in the classroom. Mm-hmm. That's why it has to be not so rigid. It's quite a flexible model. Let me say that. Mm-hmm. And as you know, it is agile in that I just said midway through a course, once we've launched a course, midway through the shelf life of that course, if we realize there are certain things we need to change, we are not shy to change it. And our schools are fantastic. We'll say, I think we need to change this aspect, we need to bring in this and probably remove this component. And that our curriculum model gives us that flexibility as well. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. As you're talking about the model and the flexibility, and I'm just thinking about it's almost it's necessary for it to work for so many different contexts, so many different schools and countries. So I think that flexibility came out of necessity, but now has become one of probably the biggest strengths of the curriculum. And you've talked a little bit about teacher agency and really where it's a curriculum that teachers can take it and mold it to fit what they know that they need in the class. But I want to take it a little bit further in that in the IB, it's also really important to have student agency and really showing the student voice. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you feel like the curriculums that you're developing, especially maybe now some of the more recent syllabi are enabling and not even enabling, but fostering more student voice and student agency in their learning.
Thank you, Courtney, for bringing in the students and the student voice. In the beginning, I had talked about how education is going to evolve and students will take a larger space in the platform in forging their learning pathways, whether it is formal learning, informal learning, whether it is also making decisions in terms of how they engage with technology to facilitate their learning. We try to bring in students in giving us feedback at different stages of our curriculum design. And this is so important for us. we try to leave space in our curriculum for teachers to co-create learning experiences in the classroom with their students, with their learners. I would just want to focus mainly on what the IB has been doing and what the IB's thinking is in terms of how we engage with this vital stakeholder in learning. If we think about it, who are we creating this curriculum for? Who are we creating these learning experiences for? They are for our young people. If it does not matter and it does not make sense to the young people, it's a waste. And therefore, that is so important. Educators, policymakers, political leaders, all types of leaders, parents, spend a lot of time designing and deciding and putting in place what the young people should be doing. And more often than not, those young people are not invited in that space to discuss about what is so vital for them. And that is just limiting their agency and their voice so much. If we bring in our young people in the discussions, in the decision making, in the deliberations where we are creating what they are going to engage with, they get more involved, they own it more, and they are able to see the meaning in it more. And more so to have a purpose for learning. And to have a reason as to, why do I go to school? Why do I have to learn mathematics? Why do I have to engage with this? Why do I need a second language? If we bring in the student more, the young person more in these discussions, then it makes more sense. And therefore, the IB has come up with a number of initiatives to try and engage with our young people, to co-create with our young people. You probably know that we have a big initiative called Festival of Hope, where we engage with our young people in the IB community, because from those festivals of hope, we actually see the action of our education. We see it happening. And that is a way of the IB also getting feedback and hearing from them. When I have attended festivals of hope and listened to what young people are talking about, I go like, that needs to be well embedded in our curriculum. That needs to come into the curriculum. And definitely we cannot measure everything, but as long as we put that, we afford that possibility for students to engage with that, it will be there in their classroom practice. It will happen. So that's one. We have a very formal process now in place of having focus groups with our young people, alumni, as well as students. We have a formal process of how we bring in students and alumni into our development meetings. Earlier on, I talked about how we develop the courses. We want to bring in young people into our development meetings. We would like to bring in young people to give us feedback in terms of, can you take away this? This doesn't make sense. My brother said that they learned this. I don't understand why we are putting this in there. And we owe it to them.
Yeah.
And most important, right now, we know how much young people are struggling with their mental health. We know even how much teachers are struggling with their mental health as well, because they're expected to manage all this. So most important is also hearing from the young people what is manageable. And one thing my team is so committed to is reducing the workload and the expectations on these young people. So all this feedback, we have a number of channels that we get from our young people, our students, whether it is through the schools or whether it's directly with the young people, whether they are the alumni who have graduated, or whether they are people who are still in school. Even the youngest, even the primary years program, we have developed surveys where we can be able to get feedback. Because if they co-create with us, they will see more sense as to why they need to engage with it.
No, I think it's such an important topic that it's it's easy to separate curriculum from the impact of the curriculum, which, like you're saying, navigating teacher workloads and student workloads and things like that. But all of it is ultimately coming from the curriculum, from that curriculum team. And I'm wondering if you could share any examples of how you have made any changes or considerations for either teacher or student workload or navigating these kind of teacher expectations that are put on them.
Remember earlier on, I talked about the 3 C's, the content, the concepts, and the context. The one thing that has been emphasized in our curriculum model and with our curriculum team is for every new course that they develop, content must be reduced by 30%.
Oh, okay.
For every course.
Yeah.
Why? Because that gives space for the teachers and the students in the classroom to engage more in the approaches to learning, in developing those kind of skills we would like the young people to develop. Mm-hmm. They will engage more in human development, not just content, not engage with content. And even kind of almost defining concepts for certain education systems is also vital, because when we design our curriculum, we also make assumptions that the teachers are designers of instruction, are designers of curriculum. We make that assumption. But all these teachers have been trained in different national bodies, and the teachers are trained differently in, say, South Africa from the way they will be trained in Japan. And we make a lot of assumptions that, the teacher will be able to do this and this. No, it's not every single teacher who is a confident instructional designer or a confident curriculum designer to be able to break it down and know, this is the way I need to start with maybe my assessment approach, and then I'll go backwards to my unit planning to see what will happen in the classroom. It's not every teacher who can do that. So the other thing that we've asked our curriculum managers to do in terms of reducing pressure and workload is also to give examples of how they can do the planning. Mm-hmm. We don't make it mandatory, but we try to scaffold it more for teachers, especially teachers who are new in the teaching profession or who are not yet as confident as other teachers. For example, having a purely inquiry-based approach to learning in the classroom. Just for a history teacher, for example, will look so different in Sweden than it will look like in Ghana. It looks different. These teachers have been trained differently. And therefore, as a team in the curriculum of the IB, if we can help scaffold that, the teacher in Ghana may be confident enough in knowing the learners so well and knowing how they would like to actually go about the learning process than probably the teacher in Sweden. But the fact that we've provided extra tools for these teachers, they can be able to pick these different tools and make it easier. But the most important is to ensure that there is less pressure and less expectations on the teacher and on the student. And we are affording space for students to be creators of their own learning approaches and not just consumers in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. I would say that's definitely been noticeable as I think about the other curricula. It seems like there's been less of it, or a drop of some of the content and a bit more on the conceptual understanding and a bit more emphasis on that. But as you were talking just now, I was really thinking of how difficult that must be to really get that balance right, to get the feedback from students or from teachers and try to understand, okay, we understand the pressure and that sort of stuff is high. And so how can we reduce this? And yet at the same time, what I constantly say with my students is you're doing the IB diploma program. Like this isn't the walk in the park. It's reputable for a reason. There's a reason that universities prefer IB diploma program students, and you're embarking on a challenging thing. This is a good chance for you to grow. And so when I hear feedback, of course, I want to be listening to it and I understand when students are overwhelmed, but at the same time, I want to kind of encourage them and push them and say, this is a very important learning step for you. And we're developing your ability to manage a lot of things at once. We're developing your skills and that sort of thing. And that's not just around the concepts or the content that might be in your curriculum. It's also around just like the typical affective skills, like how to live a life that has a lot of things going on in it. How do you manage that balance between hearing people say like, we're under pressure, we can't get all this done, and also maintaining the rigor of the IB that is so well, recognized across universities and really the world?
I think this is one of the biggest challenge, but I believe with our school community and with all the discussions we have with the universities and higher institutions of learning, I think we can get there. If you think about it, for the IB diploma to be this recognized across the world, the then IB people who were in these offices where we are started from somewhere. Then the schools who were there in the spaces where you are today started from somewhere. And we have to be able to influence that way. We do not want to jeopardize the progression of young people. When they finish their IB diploma, they should be able to continue with their education. And the diploma is seen as a qualification, of course, and a recognized qualification. And therefore, it goes also with that rigor. But we are also the same people who can be able to move the needle by preparing that with the higher institutions, with the universities. We can start small, but we can bring about the change. Actually, the IB, you probably know, is already piloting a systems transformation diploma with some of the schools.
Yeah.
And hopefully we will be able to get to have more schools take on this kind of diploma. Because apart from reducing the kind of pressure, it actually expands the capabilities of the students to be adaptive problem solvers, to navigate complex systems, because that's what we have. And if we are able to continue pushing this with universities, and Maki, there are many universities actually who appreciate that we need to be going this way. And we need to be united as a school community, as an IB community, as an international education community, to push in that space. Because it's not that the universities may not want this, it's probably that dialogue and that working together and appreciating that. So I know it will take time, but we are doing that. We are moving in that space. And the beauty is that there are many schools that are also joining us and moving in that space. But if the IB managed to, together with their school community, manage to get the diploma that recognized, we should be able to get the recognition of that kind of educational offer at that level as an acceptance, either to universities, to colleges, or to the place of work. So balancing it is always a tricky part, because the diploma also gets accredited by different countries, by different institutions, and we have to make sure that what is perceived as the standard remains.
Right.
But can't we keep that standard as well by reducing workload on students and on teachers? We can. It depends on what do you define as a standard. What are we more interested in? Are we more interested in that rigor of a young person who is 16, 17 years of old, going through schooling and they're so miserable? Or we want them to experience that kind of development we want to see in them as they experience schooling? I think it's about time we move it. We need to be making that move.
it's pretty exciting. I mean, what you're saying right now is exciting. It's the idea of like, whereas universities were kind of always the gateholder of what's going to be recognized, it's almost like things are kind of shifting a bit more, where the IB has this chance of kind of defining a curriculum that is more meaningful and able to have a better impact on young people's lives. So they can, of course, fill out the mission, of the IB itself to go and create a better, more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. And this sort of thing might be able to push more what universities are interpreting as valuable education. Do you feel like that shift is happening? And I guess to what extent is that kind of the goal of the curriculum development team with the IB?
I don't want to name universities, but as I've said, there are several universities where that has shifted. Mm-hmm. Because these children who are doing the diploma, the pilot diploma that we have with a number of schools will be proceeding to universities. They will proceed to the same universities. So there is a shift, but we need to do more. We still need to do more. Mm-hmm. So the shift is there, but we also do not realize how powerful we are as a pre-university, pre-college qualification, both from the school's perspective and from the IB perspective. We may not appreciate the power we have of influencing the thinking in the universities. If you look at the number of children who are choosing actually not to go straight to university after they graduate, either it's from the diploma or from any national curriculum in Australia, in the UK, there are more and more children choosing not necessarily to go to university. That is already a message for us. So what should we be focusing on? Ensuring that kids are going to those universities, or actually preparing our children to be ready for a complex world, to be able to navigate complexity. I think there is a strong message being sent also by our young people with the choices that they are making. And if we take all this into consideration, it's a strong message that we need to be reviewing. So you ask me, how are we looking into that in the curriculum? We are developing a curriculum that will provide schools with different pathways. You probably know already that we are doing the 16 plus review, which is the 16 plus age of educational offer. And right now we have a number of options that we think will be available for schools. There are schools that will probably continue offering the diploma in a similar way as it is offered today. But there are schools that are probably going to offer the diploma in the way that the pilot is being offered with the systems transformation. And there are schools probably that are going to embed more of a career-related offer in their 16 plus. It is upon the IB to know how they are going to package all these qualifications as qualifications, because they are all important.
Yeah. No, I think that that's so great to be able to foster different pathways and really be able to enable that in the different schools and for the different learners within the schools. And while we're in this kind of progress with the pilot and things like that, I'm wondering, to kind of sum things up, what changes in curriculum do you hope to see in the near future? You've talked a bit about different structures and things like that, but yeah, what kind of changes would you hope to see coming soon?
My dream is that we ensure that we have embedded in our curriculum design the possibility of students to progressively develop key competencies that they need in the future. The key competencies. We may not be able to assess competencies. We may be able always to assess skills, but we may not be able to fully assess competencies in the regular way of assessment. But as a schooling system, we must be able to figure out how we give that holistic performance for a student, or that holistic development for a student. And that is a dream I have for the curriculum. Competency development. And hopefully also have mirror competencies for the teachers to be able to facilitate that development for the students. Because we may develop the most glossy curriculum the best curriculum, the IB does not implement the curriculum.
Right.
It is implemented by the teachers. So if we have a set of competencies and capabilities that we would want to see our young people graduate with or develop as they go through their learning journey, there will be corresponding competencies and capabilities for the teachers to enable that. And as well as the school leadership. If we are able to mirror those side by side, then we know that we have the best environment in the schools for the young people to flourish, to thrive. So that's my dream. Competencies for both the teachers and the students and the school leadership, because the kids need the best environment to develop.
And therefore to give their best selves and to really discover who they really are, right? This is, yeah.
Absolutely.
Fidelis, this has been super inspiring. And I think my biggest takeaway from this is just how responsive and dynamic curriculum development really is. And the curriculum that is produced from the IB is, I think I knew it before our conversation. I knew it wasn't something that was just staying on the shelf and collecting dust, but this helped to really bring that to light of just how dynamic it is, how important it is to get feedback from all sorts of different areas. I knew about the Festival of Hope, and I've kind of been showing our students to get involved in that as much as I could. And it only dawned on me when you were speaking about that, of course, that's a way of gathering feedback just as much as any other way that you can then be more responsive to the curriculum that you design. This has been super inspiring for me, and I hope for anybody else who's been listening as well to realize that the curriculum that's being developed for the IB is constantly forward-looking, and it's constantly trying to create what's best for our young people.
It was really good having this conversation because I really like talking about education, and especially in regards to young people and the space that they hold in forging their learning pathways.
Us too. That's why we do it. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, John. I really appreciate this conversation. Okay.
No, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
IB Unplugged is a Cognity podcast hosted by John Patton and Courtney Marlene and produced by Catalina Gaffney. Be sure to subscribe or follow and share with your fellow IB educators. If you'd like to submit a topic, request, or question, please do so on cognity.com/IB Unplugged. Let's keep the conversation going and support each other in teaching with confidence, creativity, and joy. See you next time.